The concept of neutrality in a world war is a beautiful idea. It suggests an island of calm in a stormy sea, a place of refuge, impartiality, and peace. But the reality, as Sweden demonstrated between 1939 and 1945, is far more complex, morally ambiguous, and stained with the grease of industry and the grit of iron ore. Sweden did not fight in World War II. Its cities were not bombed. Its soldiers did not die on foreign fields. Yet, to claim it was untouched by the conflict is a profound illusion. Sweden was not a bystander. It was a critical, active, and immensely profitable supplier to the war machine that sought to conquer Europe. Its official policy was neutrality. Its unofficial economic reality was something else entirely. A carefully calculated, supremely lucrative symbiosis with the Third Reich. The story of Sweden in World War II is not one of battles, but of bargains. It's a story written in ledgers, shipping manifests, and secret diplomatic telegrams, set against the stark, frozen landscape of the Arctic Circle, where the true weapon was not a tank, but a trainload of unrefined rock. This is the story of how Swedish neutrality was built, sold, and maintained on a foundation of iron, the very material that fueled the Blitzkrieg, armed the U-boats, and prolonged the war. To understand Sweden's position, one must first look at a map, and then at a geological survey. Geographically, Sweden was trapped. To the west lay Nazi-occupied Norway. To the south and east, across the Baltic, lay Nazi Germany and soon its Finnish co-belligerent. Sweden was encircled. Militarily, it was indefensible against a determined German invasion. Its survival strategy, therefore, was not military defiance, but economic indispensability. And Sweden held one card that Germany could not live without: iron ore. Not just any iron ore, but the highest grade magnetite ore in Europe, with an iron content of over 60%, mined in the vast underground complexes of Kiruna and Gallivare in the far north. This ore was the secret ingredient for the high-quality steel needed for tank armor, artillery barrels, and submarine hulls. Before the war, Germany imported iron ore from France, Spain, and North Africa. But with the British naval blockade, the Swedish supply via the Baltic Sea became not just important, but existential. It's estimated that in the crucial years of 1940 to 1943, over 50% of Germany's iron ore came from Sweden. The trade was codified in agreements that were, for Berlin, non-negotiable. Swedish ore was shipped daily from the port of Luleå across the Baltic to German ports like Stettin and Rostock, in a convoy system protected by the Kriegsmarine. This was not a minor commercial exchange. It was the arterial flow of the Nazi war economy. But the story doesn't end with raw materials. Sweden was also a highly industrialized nation with specific world-leading expertise. The most critical of these was the manufacture of ball bearings. The Swedish company SKF, Svenska Kolligerfabriken, was, and remains, a global giant in this field. Ball bearings are the unsung heroes of modern mechanized warfare. They are in every tank's turret ring, every aircraft engine, every truck's axle. Without them, friction grinds machinery to a halt. SKF's German subsidiary, VKF, supplied the vast majority of bearings to the German aviation and armored vehicle industries. Even after Allied pressure, and while secretly supplying bearings to Britain via clandestine routes, SKF's main production flowed to Germany. The Allies knew this. In fact, the precision of Swedish industry became such a critical bottleneck for Germany that it triggered one of the most daring and controversial bombing plans of the war. Operation Gremlin later folded into the larger Operation Crossbow. British and American planners drew up detailed proposals to bomb the SKF factories in Gothenburg and the iron ore mines and railways in northern Sweden. The plans were shelved, primarily due to the political catastrophe of bombing a neutral nation and the difficulty of the mission. But they underscore a brutal truth. In the eyes of the Allies, Sweden's neutral industry was a legitimate military target. So, was Sweden simply a Nazi collaborator? The picture, like the war itself, is painted in shades of gray. The Swedish government and business elites were deeply pragmatic, and for many, sympathetic to the German cause, fearing communism more than Nazism. Yet, Sweden also performed acts of humanitarian and covert resistance that saved thousands of lives. It became a refuge for Jews and political dissidents from neighboring Norway and Denmark. Especially after 1943, it allowed Allied intelligence to operate on its soil. It trained and equipped Norwegian and Danish police troops in exile, the so-called Swedish Brigade. In the war's final months, it engaged in secret peace feelers between Germany and the West, and it provided critical intelligence to the Allies, particularly through its military observers, who had unique access to German-occupied Norway. This dual nature was the essence of its survival strategy. Give Germany the economic goods it desperately needs to avoid invasion, while giving the Allies enough humanitarian and intelligence concessions to avoid being branded an enemy, and, ultimately, to have a seat at the table when the war ended. It was a breathtakingly cynical, yet undeniably successful high-wire act. The moral accounting of Swedish neutrality is a ledger with two very different columns. On one side, the profits. Swedish banks and corporations made fortunes. Industries like SKF, ASEA, precursor to ABB, and the mining conglomerate Grängesberg saw their balance sheets swell. The standard of living in Sweden, unlike in the rest of war-torn Europe, remained high. On the other side, the cost. Every ton of ore shipped, every bearing delivered, extended the war. It meant more Tiger tanks rolling into Russia, more Messerschmitts over London, more time before the Nazi regime collapsed. Swedish neutrality, therefore, was not passive. It was an active, commercial choice that had direct, lethal consequences on the battlefield. It was a business decision where the currency was both kronor and human lives. In the end, Sweden emerged from the war physically unscathed, economically strengthened, and with its democratic institutions intact, a remarkable outcome. But this outcome was purchased with the steel that forged the weapons of its neighbors' oppression. The story of Swedish steel is the ultimate case study in the uncomfortable compromises of survival, a reminder that in the gray dawn of a world war, there are no clean hands, only calculated choices made in the shadow of an iron mountain.